Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today.
Welcome, James.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here today. We have James Hill. He also goes by James L. Hill and J.L. Hill, depending on the genre. You're writing horror, adult crime, fantasy, sci-fi. Let's start with fantasy. That's my favorite genre.
Okay.
You have the Gemstone series. Tell us all about that.
All right. The Gemstone series starts off with the Emerald Lady. It's a fantasy. It's a mermaid pirate love story. Takes place in the golden age of pirates.
Oh.
The story revolves around Shira and Jeremy. Shira being the mermaid, and Jeremy being a sailor, and they cause a tragedy, and the queen of the mermaids curses them. So Shira cannot leave the water. She must always be around water, but she can't change back into her natural form of a mermaid. She must stay in human form. And Jeremy, being the gallant person that he is, said, "That's fine, I will take care of her." And the queen said, "Good, because as long as Shira's alive, you can't die." And then he finds out that mermaids live for 1,000 years.
So that sounds like that would be a plus. So
well, it would be if you weren't being tortured the entire time.
Okay. That's trick.
Yeah, if she wasn't out to torture the two of them all the time, it wouldn't be so bad. But because of the curse that she puts on Jeremy and Shira, she causes a split in the mermaid world. And she launches into this whole world war during the American Revolution.
Ooh. So it's a historical fantasy, it sounds like.
Yes, they are historical fantasies.
Ooh. Did you do a lot of research to get all the period right? And does it mostly take place on the ship, or is it taking place on land?
It mostly takes place on the ship. This one is mostly nautical.
Okay.
And it's the three of them. Rahima is the queen, and it's how she starts this war. She wants to get rid of men. She wants men off the ocean altogether.
Okay, so all men or all pirates. Okay.
Right. And because she takes Shira and Jeremy and drops them in different parts of the world as part of this torture, the other mermaids, Abaresh, who happened to be her older sister, goes to the dragon, the last dragon, and asks him to find the girl and find the guy. And so, in order for him to do that, he's going to tell him where the other dragons are that they had captured over the centuries.
Ooh. So
and she's going to release the dragons.
Ooh,
let him know where they're at. Yes.
Wow, mermaids, pirates, dragons. So are they trying to break the curse? Do they think they can break the curse by getting Shira and her love back?
Well, the only one who could break the curse is Rahima.
Okay.
So, but she causes this war between men, mermaids, and they release the dragons back into the world, which Rahima is dead set against, since it took them so long to capture them all. And so we go into book 2, which I just finished and is now published.
The Ruby Cradle. Ooh, okay.
Ruby Cradle, yes. Well, here, this is the book cover for
Emerald
the
Lady.
Emerald Lady.
Oh, is the Emerald Lady the name of the ship?
Yes.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Yes. And then the Ruby Cradle is because the dragons were reduced to a ruby-like existence. So they would turn into this rock-like format when they lose power, and that's how they managed to trap them and then put them away somewhere.
Okay. So in the second book, have the dragons been released then?
Yes, the dragons are now released, and Zabella, who is Jeremy and Shira's daughter, is now must go back and find out how they captured or how to get rid of the dragons altogether. And the only person who could tell her is now the exiled queen Rahima.
Ooh. Okay.
And it's a time travel type of story because, like I said, mermaids live for 1,000 years, but they don't have oral history; they have mental history, so they can live the life of their ancestors through mental telepathy. And so they send Zabella to Rahima for her to find out how they originally captured the dragons and what the secrets of the dragons is. And so we go back to the age of castles. So the
Ooh.
first book is in the age of the golden age of piracy. And now the second book is sort of like a prequel continuation to the story. And we go into the age of castles around 1066, which, if you remember your history, 1066 is the Battle of Hastings,
Oh, okay.
when the English then lost England to um, the Vikings and the Norsemen. William the
Right.
Conqueror is the one who winds up on the throne, and that's when England stopped being ruled by the English. I love history. History's fun to read. It's fun to go through and look up the stories and who did what and how and when. And so the Ruby Cradle takes us through um, somewhat of the Dark Ages.
Okay. Interesting. So the people that I guess they released the dragons, but are the dragons causing problems? Is that why they want them back?
Oh yes, the dragons are nothing but trouble.
Okay.
In this series, the dragons are pretty much our bad guys.
Okay.
They're the bad guys. I like dragons. Uh, the Rock Hill Publishing Company has a dragon for a logo, so I like dragons. So, but in this instance, the dragons are our quintessential bad guy. And actually, they're not really bad guys as in evil, although they are killing and destroying and causing wars on their own, but it is their nature.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're dragons. It's like you can't blame a tiger if you put a chicken in front of it, right?
Yes, precisely.
Where did you come up with the idea for these stories?
uh, I wanted to write a fantasy. I haven't written fantasy. I was doing sci-fi, and I wrote a lot of sci-fi short stories. And Pegasus was the first novel I actually wrote. And then I wrote the Killer series, which is adult crime stories about the mafia and gangs in New York from the 70s to the 90s. And then I wanted to write something fantasy. I decided, let's break out of this and let's do some other stuff here. And so I like mermaids. I like pirates. I love pirate stories and all that kind of stuff, swashbuckling. And so I started off with the Emerald Lady. And halfway through that story, I realized it was going to be a much bigger story than just one book.
Right.
Especially when I got to the part about the dragons and how to come up with my own uh, theology, so to speak, of how these three beings control the world.
Interesting. Yeah. So sometimes stories write themselves, don't they?
Oh yeah, yeah. So it's one of the, like the Killer series. I was planning that one for decades before I started writing it. Uh, the Gemstone series, that came up all at one time. One day I start writing it, and then I get about halfway through, and I say, "Oh, this is going to be a 3-book series. I want to write 2 more books after this one, so it's
So you
just the
know
way
where
it
the
is
next,
sometimes.
sorry, so you know where the next book is going. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, the next book is going to be the Diamond Warrior. So therefore, now you know why it's called the Gemstone series. Yeah, the Emerald Lady, the Ruby Cradle, and finally the Diamond Warrior, because Isabella must find a champion to fight the dragons, and they the mermaids don't want to kill anything, but the dragons, just putting them back into the cradle and just reducing them back doesn't really solve the problem, because they can still influence men. Even though they're not in the world, they are still in the world. So she the idea is, does she kill the dragons? Mermaids are against killing. That's what Rahima's big problem was. He caused this war that also killed mermaids. And so it's the idea, okay, so what do we do? We we the dragons are supposed to be immortal. So only another dragon can kill a dragon, and then it absorbs its power and its spirit, and then it becomes a greater dragon. So, but is there a way to kill them? Can we really get them out the world altogether? And like I said, it's their nature to be destructive. And so I'm being a little bit vague on this, but it's you have to read the book to understand where the dragons come from, and and how the 3 beings actually are supposed to control the world.
Right. Interesting. No, you don't want to give everything away because then we won't be surprised or excited when we read it,
Yes.
right? So it sounds like you've written lots of books. What is your background? Do you have a background in literature?
My background, yeah, well, I started writing, like I said, sci-fi really, but I started writing like comics. The Marvel comics. We used to love to read the Marvel comics, and then we would sit there and trace out the characters and work on the new stories. Like I would figure out, okay, where's this story going to? And I would try to write the next story in the series. Never got them right, but that was my beginning of me becoming a writer. And I always had great ideas in my head. I always had these characters. In fact, my father used to say, I talk so much, I talk to myself. But that was because I always had characters in my head, and I was always working on stories. So I'd be sitting there talking to myself, talking to my characters. They're talking to each other, and that's where. So I guess I was always a writer. I was always in the storytelling mode.
Right. Yeah. So my friends make fun of me because I can't tell them something without telling them the story. And I kind of see their eyes kind of roll because I know they're like, okay, she's starting another story. So I think authors are just like that. Like we need to tell the story, right?
Yes, and sometimes I'd be sitting there talking, and people are, huh? You talking to me? I'm like, oh no, 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 I'm not talking to you. And they're like, well, then who are you talking to? Because there's only me and you here. And I'd
I'm
be
just figuring
laughing.
out my next book. Don't
Yeah,
pay any attention to me,
yeah.
right?
I'll be like, no, there's quite a few more people here.
So what
So,
is the age range for this fantasy series?
oh, this one runs from about teenagers on up. It's nothing too graphic in any of the sci-fi or fantasies. So you can anybody from about 15 or so, 14, 15. I started writing The Emerald Lady, and my grandson was like 7 or so at that time. So I'm thinking, all right, this might be, pirate adventure story. It might be good. Let me bounce it off him and see what he says. And the first part of the story, I'm talking about the boy who's Jack, who's on the ship and everything. And I said, and his father died, and he had to make a crossing wage to make sure the family survived. And he said, his father died, and he got up and ran out the room.
Oh, so you
I'm
might a
like,
little bit older than 7.
I'm like, yeah, 7 years old, not gonna help. It was like that Bambi moment,
Yeah.
when it begins. And you think Disney, there's always someone dying at the beginning of a Disney story.
Well, I have this theory that you can't really have a fantasy, especially with young adults, where they go off and save the world because their parents would never let them do that. So you have to have, in some way, missing parents, at least one parent missing, or a reason for them to like be on their own enough to make these questionable decisions about
Yes,
going to save the world, right?
yes. So I figured, okay, so we'll bump this up to like teenagers.
Fine. And it sounds like you have a bit of a romance or a love story in each of the books too.
Yeah. Well, the first book is definitely a romantic love stories type book. The second book is more adventurous.
Okay.
Uh it's not so much based on romance, but based on finding these heroes and everything, and finding the dragons, and you know, so it's more of an adventure story than a romance or love story. And then the third one, I don't know yet. We're leaning in two different ways of finding this hero, and you know, do we kill the dragon? Do we not kill the dragon? It's halfway winning, by the way. So
It'll come to you, but
yeah,
I'm sensing like a maybe a little romance between Isabella, I think that was her name, and the champion, right? I mean,
Isabella, yeah.
that's what I was kind of sensing or hoping for there.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Okay. As a person that likes a little romance in all their fantasy, that's the first thing that came to my mind when you mentioned the champion.
Yeah, and the second book really didn't have any romance in it, so I'm like, maybe I need to find, maybe the champion should be a romantic interest, and of course, Isabella is going to become the queen, so there's that whole idea. Does she become involved with a human, or does she, you know, or does she find the one of the other mermaids to uh find the champion? So
Oh, yeah. That
yeah,
works too, right?
yeah.
Well, it sounds like you have a lot of fun details to fill in on that one.
Oh yeah, yeah. I got the bones of the story written, not even the whole bones of the story. So I got a lot more to do on that one.
And do you plan your books out? Do you outline them like pretty detailed before you start writing, or do you just kind of start and see where it goes?
Oh no, I plan everything out. I'm a plotter. And one of the problems was when I wrote the Ruby Cradle and I started writing the third book, The Diamond Warrior, I realized that I crossed the timelines. And that's not good. It's
Yeah.
okay to jump back and forth through time, but when I realized this, the Diamond Warrior starts before the end of the Ruby Cradle. And that's bad because I, I mixed up history.
Okay.
Oh, I can't do that because I can't have the story start before the end of the other story. So we're going to work on that. We're going to work on the timeline and all that, and also figure out who is going to be our Diamond Warrior. That has not been determined yet.
Well, you have time to find that out. At least it's not published yet, right?
Yes.
I know I'm a pantser, so I don't plan out everything, but my editor started making me do outlines after I finished, like I'd write a chapter and then do the outline for what I'd written. So at least we could go back and find things quicker.
Yeah, it's always harder to outline the story after you're done. It's like writing the synopsis after you wrote the story. It's really so much harder that way. So I usually write the synopsis. I started doing NaNoWrite mode for about, must be 10 years now. But in NaNoWrite mode, I started writing the outline in the book, because when you do NaNoWrite mode, you can't go back. And I used to go back and forth, read some, write more, go back, read, make sure I stayed on track and everything. And trying to do NaNoWrite mode, you only got a month. You can't go back and read stuff. I wrote the entire outline to the stories in the book at the beginning of each chapter. what that chapter is going to be about. And it's only a paragraph or two to keep me on track. So I say, oh, okay. But sometimes you forget what you're doing, and you have
Right.
to go back 3 or 4 chapters to realize where was I going with this, and you got to go back 3 or 4 chapters to figure it out. So if you write your outline and outline your entire story and make it easy to find, so stick it in the book, makes it easy to find, and then you can just keep going instead of going back and forth. And then after you get it all written, you can go back and forth and tweak and play within it.
That's a really good idea. Those are some good tips for those people who are just starting out and trying to figure out how they're going to get their story written and finished.
Yeah, because I used to have 3 or 4 different documents. You know, I had the synopsis, I had characters, I have outline, I have other stuff that, research stuff on the side that I have to, find. And now it's like, just put it all in one big document and work your way around it. So even my research, sometimes I'll go find stuff, like you said, I research the history. I'll go find stuff, dates or whatever, or certain things like battles or something like that. And I'll take it and I'll put it right there in the book and just put a couple of returns and then keep writing until I get to that part. And then I read it again and I say, okay, I can use this part, I can use that part. So some of it's historically accurate. Like I said, the Battle of Hastings, I had to go through and look up actually who was in it, how did the battle go. It's more than just one battle, Hastings. It was the conquest of William the Conqueror and where he came from and everything. So all that gets melded into the story, thrown into the pie, so to speak.
That's really fascinating because you said the first one was set in the American Revolution, right? So we're gonna get
Yes.
a little history plus mermaids, pirates, and dragons, and then we get the Battle of Hastings. So we get a little bit of. So I'm not the biggest history buff. I'm bad at it. So every time I want to do anything like that, I research everything so I can figure out what I'm supposed to be doing. But yeah, I really like those elements when I can learn more about history in a fun way. So.
Yes. I, and I was okay in history in class. I wasn't really good with dates and places, but I do remember the stories, that you have to learn. So you remember, what happened in the Battle of Hastings and why was it so important, and then you could take that information and you could expand on it and make up your own reasons and some stuff because it's fantasy. So you can throw this in there along you keep who won and who lost the same.
Yeah.
It's not an alternate history.
Right. So what time period do you think the third book's going to be set in?
Oh, the third book comes back to somewhat the present time, World War II, because the second book starts with the Crimean War, which is the beginning of the modern era as
Okay.
far as warfare goes. Uh, that's when we become nations. So the third comes back to being nations but the first one is Age of Pirates. The second one, the Kingdom and Empires, we go back in time. And now the third one will be the Age of Nations, because after the Crimean War, we had more nation building than we had kingdoms, and of course there was no more empires really. The British had their empire at that point, but the rest of the world started becoming nations. Italy, Germany, um, Russia, although Russia was already. We have all these different countries now, and they're all being influenced by dragons, of course.
So we can blame all the wars on the dragons then, I'm
Yes,
guessing.
we can play all the wars on the dragons.
They're influencing people in a bad way. So yes, I can see that they need to be eradicated somehow.
Yeah, you have to find somebody to blame. It can't be the people. We can't blame the people. They're they're
Yeah.
just like, oh, well, there would be good people if it wasn't for them.
Yeah, that's a stretch. We don't need to completely rewrite history. Right? So where do you go next after this series? Do you have any plans for the books after the fantasy series?
Yeah, I'm gonna go and do an actual horror story. And I started working on the horror story, and I was like, okay, I gotta finish the Gemstone series. See, that's the problem when you come up with a good story and you jump into it, and you're like, you know what? 'Cause I've been trying to write a horror story for years, and I could never really come up with a good horror story. And I love horror, Stephen King and people like that. So it's like I wanted to do it, and I was asked to write a horror short story for charity. And I wrote this short story. It was um, it was about slavery and these people who escaped slavery in the Dismal Swamp. Down here, we have a place called the Dismal Swamp, which uh, was part of the Freedom Trail. So people escaped into the Dismal Swamp, and they took a boat up the Dismal Swamp into Maryland or beyond, up to Chesapeake Bay. So I wrote this horror story, sort of like a ghost story about them escaping through the Dismal Swamp. And after that, the floodgates open, and here comes this horror story. And I had a great idea for a vampire and witchcraft, and so I started writing that and everything. And I was like, okay, first I got to finish the Ruby Cradle. I got to finish the Gemstone series. So after I do that, I'm going to go and finish uh, called The House of Sun and Shadow.
Ooh, I love vampires, so I will be in for that too. And I feel the same way. Like if I write a short story, most of my series have come from short stories, whether I was like challenged to do one in an anthology, or just had a random, and actually most of them have been come from anthology books. Like somebody asked me to write in an anthology and I wrote a short story and I was like, oh, I love this character. I have to do more with them. So let's make it a whole series.
Yep. So yeah, so that gave me that because I haven't written horror in so many years. I wrote a couple of horror short stories. In fact, after I did that, I went tearing through my stuff to see if I could find my old story that I wrote, and I can't find it. And I had not lost my computer, but at some point, your computer crashes, so you don't have that information anymore. And I was looking on all the drives that I have. I'm a computer programmer, by the way.
Okay.
I have I have hard drives and disks and stuff, which of course the disks are no good because we don't have those type of drives anymore. So, but I couldn't find the story that I had done before. A couple of different stories. I did a couple of short stories, so I found that, and I was going to put these short stories into an anthology for myself. So I said, "Whoa, I'm going to pull some of my short stories, some of my sci-fi's out, and I'm going to put them together." I told my editor, "I'm going to put these things together. Maybe we work a couple of them, and then let's do an anthology of short stories." And so between that and then doing the horror story, and lo and behold, I'm out there cutting grass yesterday in the heat and everything, and I come up with an idea for the second part of the horror story because I was just going to be a standalone. I didn't have a real idea, but the way I ended it, vampire can't really die, so I ended with the vampire ending and everything, and the witch and all that kind of stuff. And then when I'm out there cutting grass, I said, oh, I had a good idea that I could make a second book out of this story, and we can go on from there. And I said, oh, but I'm never going to get to it. I got too much stuff to write. I got sci-fi I have to work on too,
And fantasy and
fantasy, and yeah, I
and
need more time. I got to find a way to increase. I I have started sleeping more, so that, that cuts down on the amount of writing I can do. 'Cause I used to only sleep 4 hours a day or something like that, which meant I
well,
had a couple more hours of writing. But now it's like I need more sleep.
well, that was gonna be my question. Do you ever sleep?
Do I ever sleep?
Because you
uh,
do your own publishing too. Do you publish other authors as well?
yes, yes. I have like a dozen authors that I got published now. Um, My latest one was Mark Everglade. He just finished a 3 book um, cyberpunk story. Takes place on the planet Gliese 581. I
Okay.
think it's 581G. Anyway, it's a really a good story about cybernetics and them what happens when you decide to change the world. They Gliese 581G is a tidal lock planet. I mean, one side always faces the sun. So the the economy was based on light and darkness. And so it was a very uneven society, and you had your riches, stuff like that, and they were using light as currency. So they have the people who want to speed up the rotation of the world so everybody could have light and stuff. And of course, that caused all kinds of problems on the planet. And it was cybernetics, it had living organisms on the planet and different cultures and things like that. He's a sociologist, so it's very good and a very deep uh, storyline. So he just finished that one in June, and so it's called Hemispheres is the first one, Inertia is the second one, and then I got to make sure I say this correctly. Kill Switch Overkill.
Okay, yes, I did. I'm like, this is sounding familiar because I did interview Mark already. So
Oh, okay. So you know Mark.
yeah,
Yes.
I was like, okay, this is sounding really familiar. And yeah, Kill Switch Overkill, that tagged my brain. So, and the name of your publishing company is Rock Hill Publishing, is that right?
Yes. Yes. That's right.
Fun. Well, and you said you have a dozen authors as well as your own books. Yes, I'm glad you're sleeping more.
Well, yeah, I find that I have to get a little sleep in. I'm not as young as I used to be.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting that you said that about mowing the grass because that's when most of my good ideas come when I'm like doing some chore and my mind is just you don't have to think about mowing the grass except for cutting off your foot or something, right? So, yeah, so you can just your brain can like wander and figure things out.
Yep, that's a good time. And it's hot, and you don't want to think about how hot it is outside. So, and
And
so it's
maybe
fine to think about other stuff.
yeah, and maybe the heat induced the thought too, right?
Yes.
What comes first?
Well, a nice snowy day, and they say you start on a nice snowy day and we're pushing the lawnmower.
And it did snow in Virginia Beach, right? This
Oh
year?
yeah, last year, yeah, this last winter we had quite a snowstorm and closed the place. Well, we usually close down if any more than 2 flakes fall at any one time. But we had like a foot or two of snow, and I was going to melt it with my flamethrower, but that didn't quite work out. And I was like, okay. Uh, First off, it was so cold the flamethrower wouldn't work, so I had to bring it in the house, let it warm up, and then it made little puddles of flames. It didn't actually clear the line, and I was like, well, I probably shouldn't do that because here goes a little lake of fire right here, and it's going to drift down the block, I'm sure.
Your neighbors would not be happy. They would
No.
definitely think your dragons had come to life.
Uh-huh. So I was like, okay, I guess I can. Plus, they said, oh, you can use it to clear the snow and this and that. And I'm like, I don't know. Gasoline floats. I don't know if it's going to really work that clean, but it's a lot better than having to shovel. I haven't
Yes.
had to shovel snow since I left New York.
Yeah. Well, yes, we don't want to burn down the neighborhood. So,
No, I figured that would be kind of bad. My
yeah.
neighbors would be quite mad at me after I set fire to the block. I live on a corner, so everybody down the block would be gone.
Yeah, that would be bad. Well, we're glad that worked out. Tell everyone where we can find you and your books.
Okay, the first place would be to go to rockhillpublishing.com and you'll see the bookstore there, and you can find all the books that I've written and the books that my authors have written. So, and if you look through the bookstore, you can even find bundles of books.
Oh,
You can
fun.
find like a discount or a bundle for a good price, sci-fi, the romances, all that kind of. And of course, we're always on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and any other place you might go to find your reading material. We will be there.
Fine. Well, thank you very much. And that's a great offer for readers to bundle their books together and save some money.
Yes.
rockhillpublishing.com. James Hill, thank you for being here. And I hope you will come back when you publish your next book.
Oh, I'll be back.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.